I took my 92-year-old mother to a nursing home, but on the second night, she called me and said, "Please get me out of here." I told her, "You'll get used to it." But what happened that night left me paralyzed. The sound of my mother's body hitting the floor is something I'll never forget. Not the thud, though, that was bad enough, but the silence that followed. 3 heartbeats of complete stillness before her weak cry rose from the bathroom. By the time I reached her, blood was already pooling beneath her silver hair. Her nightgown twisted around legs as thin as kindling. It was the 3rd fall that week. "I'm fine, Thomas," she insisted as I helped her up, her dignity somehow intact despite everything. "Just lost my balance for a moment." But the fear in her eyes told a different story. At 92, my mother knew as well as I did that each fall brought her closer to the one she wouldn't get up from. That was the moment I started considering the unthinkable. If you've ever faced the heartbreaking decision of placing a parent in a nursing home, you know the impossible weight of that choice. This is my story raw, unfiltered, and ultimately life-changing. Before you continue reading, please take a moment to subscribe to see the conclusion in Chapter 2, and share this with anyone who might be struggling with elder care decisions. Your comments help others feel less alone in this journey we all eventually face. I never thought I'd be the one to put my mother in a nursing home. Growing up, she was a force of nature, 5'0" but commanding respect from everyone who met her. Marianne Reynolds raised 4 children alone after Dad's heart attack took him when I was only 12. She worked 2 jobs, never missed a school event, and somehow managed to cook dinner every night. Mom was invincible in my eyes, until she wasn't. The falls started happening last year. First in the garden while deadheading her beloved roses, then in the bathroom reaching for a towel, and finally down the basement stairs, which left her with a hairline fracture in her hip. At 92, her bones weren't forgiving anymore. Neither was her mind. The doctor said early-stage dementia, but there were moments when she seemed completely lost, calling me by my father's name, forgetting to turn off the stove, wandering outside in her nightgown at 3 a.m. in February, her bare feet blue with cold by the time the neighbor found her. "Your mother needs constant supervision," Dr. Levine told me during her last hospital stay. "This isn't a matter of convenience anymore, Mr. Reynolds. It's about safety." I tried everything. Hired home health aides, but Mom fired them one by one, convinced they were stealing from her or spying on her. I installed safety equipment grab bars, medical alert buttons, motion sensors, but she unplugged the sensors and refused to wear the alert pendant. I finally moved her into my spare bedroom, converting it with a hospital bed and all the accommodations the occupational therapist recommended. But I worked full-time as a high school principal at Lincoln High, and the stress was crushing me. My blood pressure spiked so high I passed out during a staff meeting, waking up to the concerned faces of my colleagues and the humiliation of an ambulance ride with the entire student body watching. My marriage was disintegrating, Susan, and I hadn't slept in the same bed for months. The constant interruptions, the midnight wanderings, the accidents they had turned our home into a medical ward, and our relationship into that of roommates passing in the hallway. My own kids stopped visiting because conversations always centered around Grandma's care. And the last time my daughter Emily came over, Mom accused her of stealing money that never existed. Emily left in tears, and my son Mark called that night to tell me they wouldn't be bringing their 3-year-old twins over anymore. It was too confusing for them to see great-grandma like this. "You need to consider a facility, Tom," Susan said one night after Mom had accidentally set off the smoke alarm for the 3rd time that week. The charred remnants of toast still smoldering in the sink, the kitchen filled with acrid smoke. "This isn't sustainable. I'm thinking about moving out. I can't live like this anymore. I love your mother, you know I do, but this is destroying us." I looked at my wife, really looked at her for the first time in months. The dark circles under her eyes, the new lines etched around her mouth, the slump of her shoulders. She was suffering too, and I'd been too consumed with Mom to notice. "I'll make some calls tomorrow," I promised. The guilt was overwhelming. When I brought it up to my siblings during our weekly conference call, they all had reasons why they couldn't take her instead. Jackie, the oldest, lived in Oregon with her husband who was battling lung cancer. "I have my hands full already, Tom. I just can't take on Mom too." Catherine was in the middle of a messy divorce in Florida, living in a 1-bedroom apartment and working 2 jobs to stay afloat. There's literally no room, and I'm never home. Michael had 3 teenagers and a wife with MS. Their house already had one person in need of care. My brother Rick, who lived just 30 minutes away, had the nerve to say, "You've always been her favorite. She'd want to be with you. Besides, my travel schedule makes it impossible." It all fell on me, the youngest, the one who had sacrificed a job offer in California 5 years ago to stay close to mom. The one who had promised dad on his deathbed that I'd look after her. "Don't worry about your mother," I told him as he slipped away. "I've got her." Some promise that turned out to be. The search for a suitable nursing home was an education in heartbreak. The first place we toured smelled of urine and industrial cleaner, with residents slumped in wheelchairs in the hallway, staring vacantly at nothing. Mom gripped my hand so tightly I could feel her wedding ring cutting into my palm. "Not here," she whispered. "Please, Tommy, not here." The second place was cleaner, but felt like a hospital clinical. Sterile, with nurses bustling about efficiently but coldly. No plants, no color, no life. The third facility was beyond our budget, $7,500 a month for a private room, with elegant furnishings and gourmet meals. "This is where the wealthy warehouse, their inconvenient parents," Mom muttered as we left. Even in her confusion, her sharp tongue remained intact. The Golden Hills Care Center had an opening, and the social worker assured me it was one of the best in the county. Clean, well-staffed, with activities and medical care on site. The brochure showed seniors playing cards, doing gentle yoga, and gardening in raised beds. Mom's face softened when she saw the garden photos. "They have roses," she said, tracing the glossy image with a finger that had tended her own rose bushes for 60 years. We took a tour on a Tuesday morning. The facility seemed fine. Not home, but safe. Not warm, but adequate. The rooms were small, but private, each with a window and enough space for personal belongings. The dining room was bright, the food smelled edible if not exciting, and the activity calendar posted in the lobby showed everything from bingo to visiting musicians. The director, Mr. Hargrove, was polished and professional, answering our questions with practiced responses that sounded reassuring but on reflection, said very little. "We pride ourselves on our person-centered care," he said smoothly. "Each resident is treated as an individual with unique needs and preferences." Mom was quiet during the tour, taking everything in, occasionally nodding or frowning. It wasn't until we were back in the car that she spoke. "It's institutional," she said flatly. "But I suppose that's what I am now, an institution." "Mom, it's not like that," I began, but she cut me off. "It's exactly like that, Thomas. I'm not a fool. I know what's happening to me." Her voice was clear, one of those moments of perfect lucidity that made the confusion all the more cruel. "I've lived in my own home for 63 years, raised 4 children there, buried your father from there, and now I'm going to die in a room that looks like a hotel surrounded by strangers." I had no answer for that. Nothing that wouldn't sound hollow and self-serving. The truth was, I was exhausted. Bone deep, soul-crushing exhausted. The constant vigilance, the worry, the disruption to every aspect of my life had worn me down to nothing. And beneath the exhaustion was a dangerous undercurrent of resentment that shamed me to my core. I resented the intrusion into my marriage, my career, my relationship with my children. I resented my siblings for their convenient excuses. Most of all, I resented my mother for needing me so completely when I had nothing left to give. What kind of son resents his mother for growing old? I signed the papers with a trembling hand, writing away my mother's independence with a few strokes of a pen. The director beamed as if I'd just purchased a luxury car rather than sentenced my mother to end her days under institutional care. "We'll take good care of her, Mr. Reynolds," he assured me. "Your mother will be in good hands." The move was scheduled for the following Monday. We had 5 days to pack up 92 years of life into whatever would fit in a Tank's 12 room. I took the week off work, and Susan and I spent hours sorting through Mom's belongings, deciding what could come, what should be stored, what needed to be given away or sold. Each decision felt like a small betrayal. "You can't possibly need all these books, Mom," Susan said, gesturing to the floor, to ceiling shelves in the living room. There's only space for one small bookcase. I've read every one of them, Mom replied defiantly. Some more than once. In the end, we selected 30 books. Those that showed the most wear, the ones she reached for when she couldn't sleep. Her Bible went in first, then her collection of Agatha Christie mysteries, a worn copy of Pride and Prejudice, and a leather-bound edition of Robert Frost's poems that Dad had given her on their first anniversary. The photo albums were another negotiation. Dozens of them, chronicling everything from her childhood in rural Pennsylvania to the birth of her first great-grandchild. We consolidated, removing photos from albums and placing the most precious ones in a single book she could keep at her bedside. Her clothes were easier. Age and health had already whittled her wardrobe down to practical, comfortable items that would serve her well in her new setting. We packed her softest sweaters, her elastic waist pants, her non-skid slippers. The formal dresses and high heels that had once filled her closet had been donated years ago when arthritis made them unwearable. The kitchen nearly broke me. Mom's domain for most of her life, it contained multitudes the cast iron skillet she'd inherited from her grandmother, the cookie cutter she used every Christmas to make gingerbread men with her grandchildren, the handwritten recipe cards stained with butter and vanilla. What do you do with the physical artifacts of nurturing when the nurturer can no longer use them? Susan found me sitting on the kitchen floor, surrounded by measuring cups and rolling pins, silently weeping. "We'll keep it all," she said softly, kneeling beside me, "for when she visits." We both knew those visits would be limited, but I nodded anyway, grateful for the fiction. Moving day was brutal. Mom knew what was happening. She had moments of perfect clarity, and the betrayal in her eyes cut deeper than any knife. She sat in her favorite chair, already stripped of its afghans and pillows, watching as the last boxes were loaded into my SUV. "Is there anything else you want to bring, Mom?" I asked. "Anything special I've forgotten?" She looked around the empty living room, her gaze landing on the grandfather clock in the corner of the one piece of furniture we decided to leave behind until we determined what to do with the house. "Just time," she said quietly, "but you can't pack that up, can you?" The drive to Golden Hills was silent. Mom stared out the window, watching her neighborhood recede, the street she'd walked for decades, the corner store where she'd bought penny candy for her children and later her grandchildren. Susan followed in her car, carrying the more fragile items we hadn't wanted to stack in the back. The nursing home staff was waiting for us, a young woman with a clipboard and a too bright smile greeting us at the entrance. "Mrs. Reynolds, we're so excited to welcome you to our community. I'm Kelsey, the resident coordinator. Let me show you to your new home." Mom flinched at the word home, but allowed herself to be led inside, her back straight, her chin high, every inch the proper lady she'd always been. I followed behind, wheeling her small suitcase, my heart leaden in my chest. The room was as we'd seen it on the tour, but somehow smaller now that it needed to contain what remained of my mother's life. A twin bed with a vinyl mattress, a small dresser, one nightstand with a lamp, a chair by the window overlooking the parking lot. The walls were beige, the carpet industrial grade, the curtains a floral pattern that matched nothing my mother had ever chosen for herself. "This is temporary, right?" she asked as I began unpacking her clothes into the dresser, arranging her toiletries in the small adjoining bathroom. "Just until I'm stronger?" I couldn't meet her eyes. "We'll see how it goes, Mom." The staff was efficient, explaining routines and meal times, showing her how to use the call button, introducing her to her roommate, an elderly woman named Gladys who didn't acknowledge our presence at all, her gaze fixed on a muted television playing a game show. "Gladys has been with us for 3 years, Kelsey explained cheerfully. "She doesn't speak much, but she's a wonderful listener, aren't you, Gladys?" No response. We spent the afternoon arranging Mom's belongings, placing family photos on the nightstand, hanging her favorite cardigan on the bathroom door, setting up her clock radio to the classical station she preferred. Each item carefully positioned to create some semblance of familiarity in this strange new environment. A different staff member appeared with medication in a small paper cup. "Time for your pills, Mrs. Reynolds." "I don't take pills in the afternoon," Mom protested. "Only in the morning and at bedtime." The aide checked her chart. "It says here you take these at 4 p.m. doctor's orders." I intervened, explaining Mom's usual schedule, but the aide was unmoved. "The doctor here has adjusted her regimen. It's all in her chart." She held out the cup insistently until Mom relented, swallowing the pills with a grimace. Dinner was at 5, served in the communal dining room. We accompanied Mom, meeting other residents and their families, everyone maintaining the fiction that this was a choice, an exciting new chapter, rather than the last resort it truly was. Mom picked at her food meatloaf, mashed potatoes, and overcooked green beans, her appetite diminished by stress and the unfamiliar surroundings. I tried to engage her in conversation, pointing out an elegant older gentleman who might make a good friend, mentioning the book club listed on the activities board, reminding her that the garden was open to residents every afternoon. She nodded mechanically, offering monosyllabic responses, her eyes darting to the exits as if memorizing escape routes. When visiting hours ended at 7, the staff encouraged families to say their goodbyes. It's better for the adjustment period, Kelsey explained. A clean break helps residents settle into their new routine more quickly. A clean break, as if severing the most fundamental relationship in my life could ever be clean. When it was time to leave, Mom gripped my hand with surprising strength, her fingernails digging into my skin until I winced. "Don't go," she whispered, her voice breaking. "Please, Tommy, I raised you better than this. I never put my mother away." Tommy. She hadn't called me that since I was a boy. I kissed her forehead, promised to visit tomorrow, and walked out with tears streaming down my face, ignoring the desperate look she gave me. The last thing I heard as the door closed was her voice suddenly strong and clear. "You'll regret this." The drive home was silent, Susan reaching across the console to hold my hand, offering comfort she knew couldn't touch the depth of my guilt. "She'll adjust," Susan said as we pulled into our driveway. The social worker said most residents settle in within a week or two. Our house felt eerily quiet without Mom's Presentino television, tuned too loudly to her favorite game shows, no running water as she washed and rewashed dishes she believed were dirty, no middle of the night shuffling as she wandered the hallways. I should have felt relief. Instead, I felt only absence. That night, I barely slept. Susan tried to reassure me I'd done the right thing, but her words were empty comfort. She rolled away from me in bed, the distance between us more than physical. Around 2 a.m., my phone rang, Mom's new number flashing on the screen. My heart leaped into my throat. This was it. They were calling to tell me she'd fallen, had a stroke, worse. My fingers trembled as I answered. "Hello? What's happened?" "Tommy." My mother's voice small and frightened. "Tommy, is that you?" Relief washed over me. "Yes, Mom, it's me. What's wrong? Are you okay?" "Please, get me out of here," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "There are strange people walking in and out of my room. Someone took my wedding ring. I don't know where the bathroom is. A man I don't know tried to give me pills." My heart raced. "Mom, it's okay. The staff is just checking on you. Your ring is in the safe, remember? We put it there together this afternoon. And the bathroom is connected to your room, the door on the right. The man was probably just the night nurse." No, you don't understand," she insisted, her voice dropping to a whisper. "This place isn't right. Something's wrong here. They tie people to chairs. I saw it. The woman across the hall was screaming." I rubbed my eyes, exhaustion and guilt warring with frustration. This was exactly what the social worker had warned us about: confusion, paranoia, the disorientation of a new environment combined with sundowning symptoms. "You'll get used to it, Mom. Give it time. It's only the second night. Your mind is playing tricks on you." "You don't believe me," she said flatly. "Your father would have believed me." The mention of my long-dead father was a knife twist. "I believe you're upset and adjusting. Try to get some sleep, okay? I'll be there first thing tomorrow. If I'm still alive," she said, and hung up without saying goodbye, something she'd never done in her life. I sat on the edge of the bed, head in my hands, Susan's breathing even and deep beside me. She hadn't even stirred during the call. I considered calling the nursing station to check on Mom, to ask them to look in on her, but feared it would only reinforce her paranoia. The staff had assured us that night checks were routine, that resident safety was their highest priority. I lay awake until dawn, wondering if I'd made a terrible mistake. But what choice did I have? I couldn't care for her properly at home, and the alternatives were limited. This was the responsible decision, the practical one. I repeated this to myself as the sky lightened, trying to ease the knot of guilt in my stomach. When my alarm went off at 6, I was already dressed, having given up on sleep hours earlier. I left a note for Susan Gone to check on Mom. Back later. And drove to Golden Hills in the early morning light, stopping for coffee and a bag of Mom's favorite almond cookies from the bakery near her old house. The nursing home was quiet at that hour, the night shift preparing to hand over to the day staff, residents still asleep in their rooms. The reception desk was unmanned, so I signed in on the clipboard and made my way to Mom's room, nodding to a nurse who barely glanced up from her charts. The facility seemed peaceful, enough residents in the common area watching TV, staff moving efficiently through hallways, the smell of industrial cleaning products masking the underlying scent of age and medication. I passed a medication cart, an aide carefully sorting pills into cups for the morning distribution. Everything looked normal, orderly, professional. Mom's fears seemed unfounded in the calm light of day. Then I heard shouting. When I reached Mom's hallway, there was a flurry of activity. A nurse rushed past me, then another. A doctor I hadn't met stood at the doorway to Mom's room, barking orders. My heart plummeted to my stomach as I pushed my way inside. Mom lay on the floor beside her bed, unmoving, her nightgown twisted around her frail legs, a pool of blood haloing her white hair where her head had struck the corner of the metal nightstand. Her arms were bruised in distinct finger-shaped patterns, as if someone had grabbed her roughly. "What happened?" I demanded, dropping to my knees beside her. Mom. The doctor pulled me back. "Sir, please, let us work. She was found like this at shift change. The night staff reported checking on her at 4 a.m. and she was sleeping." But I knew. Somehow I knew. After they called the ambulance, after they'd stabilized her neck and loaded her onto a stretcher, after they'd assured me she still had a pulse, faint but present, I found myself standing alone in her room. The other bed was empty. Gladys had been moved, I assumed to shield her from the trauma unfolding beside her. But as I turned to follow the stretcher to go to the hospital where they were taking my mother, I noticed movement in the doorway. Gladys sat in her wheelchair, watching everything with surprising alertness in her roomy eyes. "She was trying to leave," the woman said quietly, her voice hoarse from disuse. "Said her son would come for her if she could just get to a phone." The night nurse took her call button away after she kept pressing it, said she was being difficult. When she tried to get up anyway, he pushed her back. Hard. That's when she fell. I stared at the old woman, ice forming in my veins. "Are you sure you saw this happen?" Gladys nodded slowly. "I see everything. They think because I don't talk, I don't see. But I do." She leaned forward in her chair. "You should know she's not the first. Check her things. The ring will be gone." I crossed to the small closet, hands trembling as I felt in the pocket of Mom's sweater, where we'd placed her wedding ring in its small velvet pouch, the ring too loose now for her thinned fingers. The pocket was empty? "Who?" I managed to ask. "Who did this?" But Gladys was already wheeling herself away, her courage apparently spent, her shoulders hunched as if expecting a blow. I raced through the halls, blind with rage and terror, nearly colliding with Mr. Hargrove, the facility director. "Mr. Reynolds," he began, his professional mask firmly in place, "I understand your mother has had an accident. I want to assure you that we're conducting a full investigation." I cut him off, stepping so close I could see the pores on his nose. "This wasn't an accident. She was assaulted by your staff. Her ring is missing. She called me last night saying something was wrong, and I ignored her. I trusted you with my mother." His face hardened. "Those are serious allegations, sir. I suggest you focus on your mother's medical care and leave the investigation to professionals." "Oh, there will be professionals," I promised. "Police, lawyers, the state licensing board. By the time I'm done, this place won't exist." I left him standing there, running to my car to follow the ambulance. As I reached the parking lot, my phone buzzed with a text from Susan. "Where are you? Everything okay?" How could I possibly answer that? Nothing would ever be okay again. My mother, who had never been difficult a day in her life, who had sacrificed everything for her children, who had asked me for help just once, and I had dismissed her. As the paramedics had lifted her onto the stretcher, her eyes had fluttered open for just a moment, finding mine in the chaos. There was no accusation there, only a deep, resigned sadness that pierced me more profoundly than any anger could have. And in that moment, standing in that sterile room that smelled of antiseptic and despair, I felt something inside me break beyond repair. I was no longer a good son. I was the man who had abandoned his mother to monsters. I followed the ambulance to Memorial Hospital, my vision blurred with tears, my hands shaking on the steering wheel. The weight of my failure threatened to crush me. One sentence kept repeating in my mind, a terrible mantra I couldn't escape. You'll regret this. She was right. God help me. She was right. The fluorescent lights of the hospital emergency room buzzed overhead, casting everyone in a sickly pallor as I paced the waiting area. My mother had been whisked away immediately, a team of doctors and nurses surrounding her gurney, blocking my view as they called out vital signs and medical terminology that meant nothing to me. Family of Marianne Reynolds? I had nearly collided with the doctor as I rushed forward. That's me. I'm her son. How is she? The neurologist didn't sugarcoat it. Subdural hematoma, bleeding in the brain from the fall. At her age, surgery carries significant risks, but without it. He let the sentence hang in the air, heavy with implications. What kind of risks? My voice sounded foreign to my own ears. Significant risk of stroke, infection, further brain damage. But without intervention, the pressure will continue to build. He looked directly into my eyes. I need your decision quickly, Mr. Reynolds. How was I supposed to make this choice? Yesterday, Mom had been alert, angry, herself. Now her life depended on my judgment, the judgment that had already failed her so catastrophically. Can I see her first? He nodded, leading me through double doors into the trauma area. Mom lay still on a bed, surrounded by machines, tubes, and wires connecting her to monitors that beeped and hummed. Her face was peaceful, belying the storm raging inside her skull. The bruising around her right temple had deepened to a sickening purple, matching the finger-shaped marks on her arms that disappeared beneath her hospital gown. I sat beside Mom's bed, her small hand cradled in mine. She looked both fragile and powerful diminished, yet somehow more essentially herself than she had in months. The confusion and fear that had clouded her features were gone, replaced by a serene expression I hadn't seen since before Dad died. Do the surgery, I said, my voice cracking. Whatever it takes. The next few hours were a blur. I called my siblings, each conversation more painful than the last. Jackie immediately booked a flight from Portland. Catherine was driving up from Florida. Michael would arrive tomorrow with his wife. Rick, only 30 minutes away, said he had an important meeting but would try to come by afterward. I called Susan too, my voice breaking as I told her what had happened. I should have listened, I repeated. She tried to tell me. You couldn't have known, Susan said, but her voice held a note of uncertainty. I'll be there as soon as I can. 5 hours later, I paced the surgical waiting room, my siblings finally arriving one by one, their faces drawn with travel fatigue and worry. My sister Catherine hurled accusations. We should have kept Mom at home. We should have hired round-the-clock care. We should have tried harder. We? I challenged, anger flaring. Where were you when I was caring for her 24/7? When I was changing sheets at 3 in the morning and missing work to take her to doctor's appointments? When was it ever we? My brother Rick refused to look at me, studying his phone as if it contained the secrets of the universe. Michael sat silently, his massive hands clasped between his knees. Jackie, the oldest, took charge of coffee and update requests, as she always did in a crisis. When the surgeon appeared, his face told us everything before he spoke a word. She made it through the procedure, he said carefully. But there was extensive damage. She's stable but unresponsive. What does that mean exactly? Jackie demanded. She's in a coma, and given her age and the severity of the injury, we don't expect her to regain consciousness. I'm sorry, but you should prepare yourselves for the possibility that this might be it. The words hit me like a physical blow. I stumbled backward until my legs found a chair, and I collapsed into it. This is your fault, Catherine spat at me, her face contorted with grief and rage. You put her in that place. She called you for help, and you ignored her. No one contradicted her. Susan, who had arrived shortly after my siblings, stood in the corner of the waiting room, arms crossed, looking at me like I was a stranger. 2 police officers arrived while we waited for Mom to be transferred to the ICU. They took statements from each of us, paying particular attention to my account of Gladys's comments and the missing ring. We've already received calls from 2 other families with relatives at Golden Hills, the older officer explained. Your mother's case may be part of a pattern. They promised to investigate, to interview staff and residents, to check for security footage. But their careful professionalism couldn't mask the grim reality. Whatever they found wouldn't undo what had happened to Mom. That night, after everyone else had gone to nearby hotels to sleep, I sat alone with Mom in the ICU. The rhythmic hiss of the ventilator was the only sound in the dimly lit room. "I'm so sorry," I whispered, pressing my forehead against her papery hand. "You were right. I should have listened." Her face remained impassive. No flicker of recognition, no sign that she heard me. The doctor had explained that the damage was extensive, that even if she survived, she would likely never wake up, never speak again, never know me. I dozed fitfully in the vinyl chair beside her bed, waking every time a nurse entered to check vitals or adjust medication. Morning arrived, harsh sunlight streaming through blinds that didn't quite close, illuminating Mom's face in unforgiving detail every line, every shadow a testament to her 92 years of life. 2 police detectives came that afternoon. The nursing home roommate had given them a formal statement about the night nurse, about Mom's call button being taken away, about the rough handling. They were investigating allegations of elder abuse at Golden Hills. Apparently there had been other incidents, complaints that had been buried by management. They asked questions I couldn't answer, showed me photos of bruises on other residents I couldn't bear to look at. "We found your mother's ring," the female detective said, placing a small evidence bag on the bedside table, along with jewelry from 3 other residents. It was in the night nurse's locker. "Will he be arrested?" I asked. "He already has been. But Mr. Reynolds, this goes beyond one bad employee," the management knew. "There have been complaints for years, all dismissed or covered up. We're building a case against the entire administration." It was small comfort. Justice couldn't wake my mother, couldn't undo the damage, couldn't absolve me of my failure to protect her. Days blurred together. I took a leave of absence from work and moved into Mom's hospital room. Susan brought me clean clothes, but stopped trying to convince me to come home. Our marriage was collateral damage I couldn't deal with yet. I couldn't leave Mom. I owed her this much at least to not abandon her again. I talked to her constantly, reminiscing about my childhood, apologizing over and over, playing her favorite big band music on my phone. The nurses were kind, showing me how to apply lip balm to her parched lips, how to massage her limbs to prevent stiffness. They said hearing was often the last sense to go, so I made sure she heard my voice every day. "Remember when I was 10 and you caught me smoking behind the garage?" I asked one afternoon, laughing despite everything. "You made me smoke an entire pack until I was green. I never touched a cigarette again." I told her about my first heartbreak, how she'd sat up with me all night, making hot chocolate and reminding me there were other fish in the sea. About the time she'd stayed up for 3 days straight sewing my sister's prom dress. About the Christmas she'd worked triple shifts to buy Michael the bicycle he wanted. "You were always there for us," I said, throat tight with unshed tears. "And when you needed me, I failed you." 2 weeks after the surgery, Catherine showed up with a lawyer. She wanted to sue the nursing home for negligence. The roommate had given a formal statement about the call button being taken away, about Mom's ring being stolen, about the night nurse's rough treatment. A criminal investigation was underway, and 3 staff members had already been arrested. "It won't bring her back," I said dully, watching the steady rise and fall of Mom's chest, controlled by machines. "No, but it might save someone else's mother," Catherine replied, her anger toward me softening slightly. "And this is the only way I know how to fight for her now." I signed the papers, giving consent for the lawsuit. It felt hollow, performative, too little too late. But maybe Catherine was right. Maybe it would prevent another family from experiencing what we were going through. My siblings returned to their lives one by one, promising to come back, to call daily, to help however they could, but the day-to-day reality of Mom's care fell to me. I learned to suction her mouth, to help the nurses turn her to prevent bed sores, to interpret the various beeps and alarms of the machines keeping her alive. A month after the fall, the neurologist suggested moving Mom to long-term care. "This is her life now," he said gently. "You need to consider what she would want." I knew what she would want. She'd made me promise, years ago after visiting her own mother in a similar state, to never let her linger. "Let me go with dignity," she'd said over breakfast one morning, apropos of nothing. "No tubes, no machines. When it's my time, let me go." But I couldn't bring myself to have the conversation about removing life support. Not yet. Some irrational part of me believed that as long as those machines kept her breathing, there was hope for redemption. Then, on a rainy Tuesday afternoon, as I dozed in the chair beside her bed, I felt the slightest pressure against my fingers. Her hand had moved. I jerked awake, heart pounding. "Mom?" Nothing. But later that evening, it happened again. And the next morning, her eyelids fluttered when I spoke. I reported these changes to her doctors, who cautioned against hope. "Reflexes," they said. "Autonomic responses. It happens near the end." But I knew my mother. She was fighting. A week later, she opened her eyes. 3 days after that, she squeezed my hand on command. The medical team was stunned. "Remarkable," the neurologist said, shaking his head as he reviewed her latest scans. "The brain is a mysterious organ. I've never seen this kind of recovery in someone her age after this type of injury." Progress was agonizingly slow. Words came back one by one. First, yes and no. Then, water and tired. Physical therapy was grueling, learning to sit up, to hold a spoon, to move from bed to chair. Mom's frustration was palpable, her determination even more so. Then came the day that changed everything. I walked into her hospital room to find a police detective sitting beside her bed. Mom was sitting upright, more alert than I'd seen her in weeks. "Mr. Reynolds," the detective said, standing, "your mother has been providing us with some very valuable information." Mom's eyes found mine, clear and sharp. "Tell him," she said to the detective, her voice stronger than it had been since before the fall. "Your mother has been describing in detail the operation at Golden Hills," the detective explained. "It appears there was an organized effort to steal from residents, to cut corners on medication and care. Several staff members were involved, including administrators." He hesitated. "And she's identified the night nurse who assaulted her from photos. He had previous complaints at 3 other facilities that were never properly investigated." I stared at Mom in disbelief. "You remember all that?" She nodded slowly. "Every minute," she said, the words coming with effort but clear intention. "They thought, old people, don't notice, don't matter." The detective continued. "Your mother's testimony, combined with the physical evidence and other witness statements, is going to put several people in prison, including the facility's director, who apparently was taking kickbacks to hire unqualified staff at lower wages and ignore complaints." I couldn't process it. My mother, who doctors had given up for dead, who I had been ready to let go, was now the star witness in what was shaping up to be one of the largest elder abuse cases in the state's history. 2 months after her surgery, Mom shocked everyone again. During a physical therapy session, frustrated with her slow progress using a walker, she suddenly pushed it aside and took 3 unassisted steps before the therapist could catch her. "Don't need it," she declared, a flash of her old stubbornness returning. The therapist was astounded. "Mrs. Reynolds, your determination is incredible." By the 3-month mark, Mom was speaking in complete sentences, feeding herself, and insisting on wearing her own clothes instead of hospital gowns. The doctors used words like miraculous and unprecedented. They wanted to write papers about her case. 4 months after the fall, she testified at the preliminary hearing against the nursing home staffer, words careful and measured, but devastating in their clarity. 7 people were indicted on various charges, from elder abuse to fraud to assault. The case made national news. "You did this," Mom told me after the hearing, touching my face with her still, unsteady hand. "Did what?" I asked, confused. "Gave me reason to fight, to get Justice. I shook my head, unwilling to take credit for anything positive in this nightmare. I put you in that place. I didn't listen when you called for help. Yes, she agreed, never one to sugarcoat the truth. That was wrong. But after you stayed, never left, talked to me when I couldn't answer. Her forgiveness was harder to bear than her accusation would have been. Susan and I separated during Mom's recovery. The strain had been too much, the gulf between us too wide to bridge. I couldn't blame her. I'd been absent, even when present, consumed by guilt and focused entirely on Mom's care. Our marriage was another casualty of my choices. But in some strange way, that loss felt right. It was the price I needed to pay. 6 months after her fall, against all medical predictions, Mom was ready to leave the rehab facility. The question of where she would go loomed large. Not another institution, she said firmly during a family meeting with the discharge planner. Not ever. My siblings exchanged glances. Jackie started to speak about a highly recommended assisted living facility near her home in Oregon, but I interrupted. She's coming home with me. We sold the house and bought a single-level ranch with wide doorways and a walk-in shower. I took a lower-paying administrative role at a different school that gave me more flexibility. We hired help for when I couldn't be there, but I personally vetted and supervised every caregiver. It wasn't easy. Mom never fully recovered her previous mobility or speech fluency. Her right side remained weaker, her memory more fragmented than before. Some days were better than others, but she was alive, she was fighting, and most incredibly of all, she had forgiven me. The civil lawsuit against Golden Hills resulted in a substantial settlement. Mom insisted the money be used to establish a foundation for nursing home oversight surprise inspections, background checks, a dedicated hotline for residents and families to report concerns. A year after that terrible night, Mom was interviewed on 60 Minutes about her experience and the foundation's work. She needed help with some words, and she used a cane to walk onto the set, but her mind was razor sharp as she delivered the closing line that would become the foundation's motto: "The measure of a society is how it treats its most vulnerable. Not with pity, with dignity." The interview made her something of a celebrity. Letters poured in from families across the country, sharing similar stories, thanking her for her courage. 3 state legislatures introduced Reynolds laws to strengthen nursing home regulations and oversight. One evening, as I helped her into bed in what had once been my home office, she gripped my wrist with surprising strength. "You know," she said, her speech clearer on good days like this one, "I never thought I'd be glad you put me in that place." I flinched. "Mom, no, listen," she insisted. "If you hadn't, those people would still be hurting others. Sometimes terrible things happen for reasons we don't understand until later." I swallowed hard. "I still should have listened when you called." "Yes," she agreed, never one to sugarcoat the truth. "But you've listened to every word since. And look what we've done with it." She was right, as she had been so many times in my life. It had taken nearly losing her to understand what I should have known all along, that sometimes our greatest failures can lead to our most important work, if we're brave enough to face them directly. My mother lived 3 more years, years filled with purpose, advocacy, and a closeness between us I hadn't felt since childhood. When she finally passed, it was peacefully, in her sleep, in her own bed, in our home. The funeral was attended by hundreds, including families she had helped through the foundation, legislators who had championed her cause, and even the detective who had taken her statement that day in the hospital. I had been paralyzed by guilt once, standing in that sterile nursing home room watching my mother bleed. But she had shown me that paralysis is a choice. That redemption comes not from forgiveness alone, but from action, from taking the worst moment of your life and transforming it into something that helps others. Every night now, I sit on the board of the Reynolds Dignity Foundation. And every night, before our meetings begin, I say the same words. "I'm listening now, Mom. We all are." Have you experienced caring for an aging parent or loved one? Your story matters. Share your experience in the comments, and subscribe to see more stories that shed light on the difficult choices families face. Together, we can ensure dignity for our elders. Rain Tintar B.